Hello YouTube friends. In this video I want to give you 15 tips for finding time for creativity. I was at Stamporama selling my papercraft supplies a couple of weeks ago, and so many people said to me that they felt they didn't have time for crafting anymore, that they had loads of supplies and they obviously were having a great time at the papercraft fair, shopping around for lovely new products. But so many people said, oh, I feel like I don't have time for crafting anymore, I'm so busy, I don't even use the stuff I've got, like it's so hard to make time. And I thought that was a shame, because paper crafting, making cards, scrapbooking, journaling, all that kind of thing is so much fun and so enjoyable, and for people to feel like they don't have time for their creative hobbies anymore, it's a shame. So in this video I wanted to give you some tips for making time for creativity. So my first tip is to get more sleep, which seems a bit paradoxical. If you go to bed early, how is that giving you any more time in your life? Well, I found that recently, over the past couple of weeks, I've been accidentally going to bed later and later, and I found that each day I felt more and more kind of overwhelmed, and that I had less and less time, and that I had more and more on my to-do list. And I think that's because I wasn't giving myself the rest I needed to have a clear head. So you think you'll lose time going to sleep early, but the clarity and energy that you gain the next day will more than compensate. So a lot of it, when we say we don't have time, it's because we feel we don't have time, like we feel overwhelmed and kind of, crushed down with the weight of things around us and the amount of things on our to-do list. And I think, for me at least, getting a good night's sleep is a good antidote to that. I say a good night's sleep, I still have a 1-year-old daughter who wakes up at least 3 times a night, usually kind of 4 or 5. So a good night for me means that she only woke 3 times. But I can't fix what time the kids wake us up, but I can choose to go to bed early. Not every night, because I do want to feel like I have some time to get things done as well. So maybe 2 or 3 nights a week at least I try and take myself to bed at 9 o'clock, and I find that it does make a massive difference to my whole week. So that's my first tip. Second tip is to think about exactly what's bugging you the most that you haven't got to. So for example, when it comes to cleaning, obviously I think like, oh my goodness, the whole house is a mess. But actually there's normally one thing that's particularly bothering me. So for example, if I'm, just finished my shower, I'm looking around the ensuite, I think this house is a mess. But what I actually mean is I haven't emptied the recycling bin yet, and there's dust on the skirting boards. So instead of kind of catastrophizing and thinking everything's a disaster, I've actually kind of tried to focus my mind to pinpointing the exact things I've noticed that are bugging me, and then I can go and do something about those as a start. So it feels less like I need to clean the whole house all at once, and a bit more like I've got 2 tasks to start with in the morning. So the same kind of thought process can be applied to your creativity and to the crafting or the painting that you want to get to. Your thought process might be, I don't have time to use any of my craft supplies or do any painting, but just kind of have a think about what exactly prompted you to think that. Maybe you got a new stamp set last week and you're really excited to try it and haven't gotten to use it yet. Or maybe you took a photo of a landscape a few weeks ago that really inspired you and you wanted to paint it, but you haven't got to do that yet. If you kind of just take a moment to close your eyes and just really think about, focus on exactly what it was that kind of prompted that particular thought of not having any time, there's often one specific thing that jumps into your mind that you really wanted to do and haven't got to yet. And then once you know what it is, you can make a plan to do that exact thing. So tip number 3 is visualize what you will do and when you'll do it. I was reading a book recently called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and one of the tips she gave is that if people are procrastinating from something that they want to do or haven't got around to yet, it's often because they haven't made a concrete plan. So if you think, I want to make a card with this stamp set, or I want to paint this particular scene, or I want to take this particular tutorial class online. If you visualize in your mind exactly when and where you'll do that, so for example, you might say, okay, on Saturday morning after my breakfast, 10 a.m, I'm going to make a cup of tea, I'm going to sit down at my kitchen table, I'm going to get out my sketchbook and my pencils and my watercolor paints, and I am going to paint that image that keeps popping up in my mind. Once you've got a concrete plan in your mind and you visualize that happening, exactly where and when, you will find it easier to follow through on that, rather than thinking, at some point I must get to this, at some point I must do some painting. If you think about what and when, that will really help you to make the time and space for it. My tip number 4 is to start with something super simple for 5 minutes. So if you kind of think, oh, I need to clear, 2-3 hours to really get stuck into a project, often you find that you don't get round to that. So sometimes thinking in just 5-minute increments can be really helpful. So what can I do for 5 minutes when I find them? I can get out some card that I like, I can get out some paper packs, I can get out some stamps that match. So it just takes less than 5 minutes. I'm going to grab those 3 things and maybe some scissors and a pencil. I'm just going to put them down somewhere ready to use. And that's all you need to do in that moment, just a few minutes. The next day you might think, okay, I'm just going to create some card blanks. I'm going to get some A4 card. I'm going to cut them up into A5 and fold them in half. And then I've got 2 card blanks ready to go for the next day. The day after that, you might think, okay, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to stamp some images. You don't have to do anything else. Just get out your ink and your stamps, stamp a page of A4, all the same thing, and then leave it. That's all you need to do. And the next day you might choose to colour in your stamped images. And then the day after that you might think, oh, okay, I've got all my elements ready. I've got my bases here, I've got my pattern paper, I've got my stamped images, I've coloured them, I've cut them out, and then all I have to do is spend a few minutes arranging them. So you don't have to kind of put aside mammoth long sessions to create. You can just do things in small increments. Tip number 5 is to involve your kids or your family in what you want to create. So I have 2 young children, and I find that if I've not managed to get any painting or sketching done, I really feel like I want to keep up that practice, I get them involved. So I will get out some of my less precious supplies and I'll just say, okay, we're going to make some cards this afternoon, or we're going to do some painting. And I don't get to do a lot, and I certainly don't get to do anything that doesn't end up covered in scribbles, but I do get to do something. I get to move my hand, I get to do some sketches, do some scribbles, and they get to join in with the activity. My daughter enjoyed making cards with me a couple of weeks ago. We made birthday cards and Father's Day cards, and I gave her the scraps of paper and let her stick them wherever she wanted on the fronts of the cards, and there were a couple of extra bows and things, and they might not look like the kind of cards that I would make, but she helped to make them, and it was really nice that we got to spend that time doing that activity together. Tip number 6 is to have a mini kit around at times that you wouldn't normally be creating. So most of my art supplies are upstairs, but if I want to fit in like a 5-minute warm-up or just quick sketching type of painting or drawing, I have a mini kit down here. I will show you, it's just behind me. In my little zip bag, I have a tiny sketchbook, which is a moleskin one, a couple of watercolour paint palettes, a water brush, a regular paintbrush, and then pencil, fine liner, and a few other bits and pieces. And I just keep this downstairs so that if I want to fit in just a few quick minutes of something, anything, even laying down a background that I'll use another day to go on top of, then I can do that with this mini kit. For you, it could be something as simple as if you're waiting for the kettle to boil for a couple of minutes, is there something that you could fit in? Could you put down a background of watercolour paint to go on top of later? Could you have a few little bits of craft supplies somewhere that you wouldn't normally have them, like a mini kit that you could use. So perhaps you could put yourself together a tiny card making kit, some small card blanks, some pieces of paper cut to the right size, some toppers and some foam pads, and then it is just a case of a couple of minutes to construct those cards really quickly if you find that you have a couple of spare minutes. Instead of scrolling on your phone whilst you're waiting for your lunch or something like that, that you can just quickly put together a few cards and give you that kind of boost of, yay, I made some cards today. Tip number 7, since I mentioned screen time, is related. So check what you're doing instead of creating. So for example, are you mainly consuming content in the time that you have, like maybe in evenings or lunchtimes or weekends? Do you spend a lot of time on your phone? Do you spend a lot of time on Facebook or Instagram or even YouTube watching other people create instead of creating yourself? And I know that when you're feeling tired and uninspired, it is easier just to consume that content and feel kind of, to enjoy seeing other people's creations and to feel inspired by that and think, oh, I'll get around to something like that one day. But one thing I've learned is that apps are designed to capture our attention and hold it for a long period of time, to keep us engaged, to keep us coming back for more. And it kind of takes a deliberate effort to tear yourself away from that and to decide, no, that isn't how I want to spend my time. One book that I read that describes this really well is called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, and it talks about the way that apps are designed to draw us in and keep us on the platform for as long as possible. And once you kind of realize how these things work, you become a lot more aware of, did I actually choose that? When you open up your phone to look at your calendar and you find 10 minutes later that you're on Instagram, you're like, but what happened? Like, I don't even remember clicking on Instagram. Why am I on here? At least that happens to me. So now I try and be really aware that anytime I pick up my phone, I'm kind of clear on what I'm doing and why. And if I find myself scrolling Facebook 15 minutes later, I think, oh, like, what happened? I'm annoyed at myself. But on most phones, I think these days you can swipe to check your screen time, see which apps are taking the most time, and then take steps to limit that. If you're choosing to spend your time on those apps and those platforms, then of course that's no problem. But I think if you're like me, a lot of people might find that they didn't really choose to spend half an hour or an hour on Facebook or Instagram, that it just kind of happened. So those are the kind of things to be aware of and to try and choose differently. My tip number 8 is to change your mindset. So to think, I do have time. So everyone has the same amount of time in the day. It's just a case of what you're prioritizing. Obviously, there are things that we have to prioritize over and above our crafting time or our painting or creative time. But one thing I found helpful is to practice a growth mindset. So to think about your ability to create or paint or whatever it is that you want to do or to get better at as being available for improvement. So it's not fixed. You can't say, oh, I'm good at this or I'm bad at this. It's to think, no matter what time I put into something, it is all contributing to my kind of growth and learning in this particular thing. So sometimes I think we can put off creative projects because we're afraid of the outcome. We think, oh, I'm not feeling creative. I won't make a very good card today. I won't make a very nice painting today. But I think having a growth mindset teaches you that it's okay to make bad art, to make bad craft projects. In fact, it's a good thing to make bad art because that's how you learn. And if we focus on the process rather than just the outcome, that can help us to overcome some of the mental blocks we have around creating, to think, okay, no, I'm not going to paint a masterpiece in the 10 minutes I have this morning, but it is important for me to craft or me to create, to kind of feel that joy in the process and to enjoy the process. So that's kind of having a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, understanding what you do as a way to learn and a way to kind of enjoy spending your time rather than thinking everything depends on the outcome and what other people will think of it. So the book which has more about that is called Mindset by Carol Dweck, so I really recommend that. The other two books I recommend, if your feelings of lack of time stem from the fact that you're a bit creatively blocked or a bit creatively afraid of jumping into your projects because you think, oh, I'm not going to do a good job or it's not going to come out well, then I would recommend Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book here, Creative Living Beyond Fear. So that has loads of excellent practical tips and kind of mindset tips about just diving in and creating. It doesn't matter what it is that you do, crafts, art, dance, filmmaking, whatever creative pursuit, writing, whatever it is. It's a really good book full of tips. The other one that I've enjoyed reading in the past is called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Again, that is more of a kind of course, I guess, to kickstart or reignite your creativity and just get you through those creative barriers where you want to make things but you feel like you can't for whatever reason. My next tip, number 9, is let go of supplies and projects that no longer inspire you or serve you, so that you're not weighed down by the thoughts of, oh, I should do this, I should do that, when it comes to a hobby that should bring you joy. So I think a lot of the time we feel like we can't move on to something we really want to do because we've got things that we haven't finished. And a good way to think of those projects is that they served their purpose and you might be ready to move on from them now. If it's something that you really want to finish, then obviously do and try and make your plan for that. But if it's something that you've moved past and you're hanging on to, then kind of think about it with a critical mind. And as an example, I used to do kind of project life, which is scrapbooking photos in little pockets, and I feel like I should carry on with that because I still got lots of supplies for it and I've still got photographs that I haven't used in those pages. But when I think about it critically, I don't actually want to keep creating those pages because the albums take up lots of space, and I find that I prefer printing off my photos and putting them in a regular album, which is so much quicker. And so that project for me has kind of served its time, it served its purpose. I enjoyed making those projects at the time. I enjoyed creating those elements and those items, but I'm ready to let go of that particular aspect of my crafting now. So I feel like I'm kind of freed from that project. I've closed that project off in my mind. It's not finished, but it's finished for me. You can also have the same approach to your craft supplies. So I think a lot of the time people feel guilt around the craft supplies that they own and haven't used yet and feel like, oh, I've got to get to that, I've got to get to that. And if you're anything like me, you end up with tons and tons of stamps and papers and papercraft collections that you haven't used or haven't used much. And there is a big feeling of guilt around that. And one book that I think is helpful, a couple of books are this one, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying by Marie Kondo, and the follow-up book, which is Spark Joy by Marie Kondo. So those are about kind of having clear outs and keeping only the things that really spark joy and inspiration for you. So I really recommend those books if you're kind of wanting to approach a big clear out of craft supplies. But if you're wanting to just kind of focus on the things that you love and to let go of a few things that you don't, a good way to think about it is that those craft supplies have served their purpose for you. So when you bought them, you loved them, you experienced that feeling of joy, you experienced that feeling of inspiration, you brought them into your home, into your life, and for whatever reason you didn't get to create with them, or you didn't get to create much, and now they don't hold that feeling of joy for you anymore. They maybe hold feelings of like guilt that you didn't get around to them, or maybe you're kind of annoyed that you spent money on that and that you're not using it. It's okay to let go of those things. You don't have to keep something that you don't enjoy anymore, or that you don't feel that you want to use anymore. You did at the time and that was okay at the time, but now you feel differently, and that's okay too. So it's okay to sell on those items or to give them to charity or however you like to de-stash. And that will give you the kind of, not just the physical space, but the mental space to be like, okay, I'm now surrounded by things that I love right now in this moment, and I feel good about beginning to create with those again. That kind of leads into tip number 10, which is to dedicate a clear and uncluttered and inviting space to your craft or art, if possible. I know not everybody has the luxury of a dedicated space, but if you can make that little corner to set up as your own inspiration area, then that can be a nice way to kind of invite yourself to craft. I'm terrible for leaving out half-finished projects, or if I make a couple of cards, I'll leave out all of the ephemera, all the papers, all the stamps, everything on the side, because I think I'll go back to that and I'll make a couple more. And it can just sit on my craft desk for weeks and weeks and weeks until I think, I've not started anything else because I left out what I had. So I'm trying to get into the habit of, whenever I've finished, even if I think I want to make more cards with the same collection, of just putting that away and leaving my desk clear. And I just find that when I have a welcoming space to create, I feel a lot less overwhelmed by all of the projects that I should or could be doing. And I feel kind of ready to pick out something that is going to be enjoyable for that short amount of time that I have to dedicate to it. Tip number 11 is about inspiration. So I sometimes think it's really easy to get sucked into Pinterest and Instagram and YouTube videos for inspiration, thinking, oh, they're doing that, I'll buy that product and I'll do the same. But actually we have a lot of inspiration around us in our homes, in our surroundings. I feel like the online world is kind of getting faster and faster, and it in some ways scares off creativity by making you think that you have to have beautiful results like right now, like instantly. You've got to be able to do exactly what they do. And we're used to seeing video content sped up and chopped up, and it looks like something's been achieved very quickly, with very little effort, and it makes real life feel really slow and really kind of, I don't have time to spend an hour on a card, but the reality is, like, this sped up consumption of content gives us that feeling of being rushed, and makes us feel like we should in turn rush our projects to make things quickly that look very good. And the reality is that actually these are kind of slow, thoughtful hobbies that do take a lot of time and do take a lot of practice, and that you can't kind of rush through those. You have to, I suppose, take the time to accept that slower pace and to enjoy that slower pace. And I think one of the things that facilitates that is to take inspiration from the world around you. So it could be a wallpaper that you love in your room. It could be the patterns on your cushion. It could be pulling out some books from your shelf and looking at colours that you like, looking at children's books is a good example for me. I have a lot of kids' books, and as I'm reading to my children, I pick out images that I love, like if there's a way that an illustrator has done a particular scene that I really like, I kind of make a mental note of it. I can find inspiration in a lot of things around me, and when I filter out the mental clutter of all these images and videos online, I find that I can more easily pick out something that speaks to me in my environment and use that as a source of inspiration. Tip number 12 is to ask for help. So for example, could someone else make dinner tonight, or take the dog for a walk, or take the kids to the park for half an hour on a Saturday morning so you can have a little bit of time to yourself? It feels like we ought not to ask for something so selfish, But when we feel we have no time, it's sometimes because we're in a stage of our lives where we have to put the needs of others above our own. So, for example, if we have young children or elderly parents, if we learn to ask for help and receive it, to make a bit of space for ourselves, to do what we love to do, it can help bring a bit of balance back into our lives and make us feel that, we have done something for ourselves today. Tip number 13 is related to that, so that it's actually to acknowledge the importance of creativity. So it represents like your fire, your spirit, your passion, that kind of really joyous feeling of inspiration when you see something you love or you have an idea that you really want to do, and the satisfaction of actually making something with your hands as well. So I think in our society these days, it feels like it's set up in such a way as to kind of devalue arts and crafts. It's either left to professionals, you have to be an incredible artist and creator, or it's only a hobby and it falls to the bottom of your to-do list every day. But there is a middle ground, I think. We don't have to be incredible creators. We don't create for others to judge it, but because it kind of is something for us. It really feeds something within us. And I think it is important to make space for that feeling of joy to come back into our lives. So hone in on what sparks that joy for you, and don't be afraid to use your favourite and best art supplies. It's not a waste of time. It's not allowed because you haven't done the housework yet, or you haven't done this or that piece of admin. There is always time to fit in something that you love to do. You don't have to complete every single job under the sun before you get to something you love. So just boost it up your to-do list a little bit higher. My tip number 14 is to create with friends. So for example, you could have a little open morning at your house where you invite your friends and they can bring whatever craft or creative project they're working on. It does involve a bit of organisation in advance, but once you kind of clear the morning and invite some friends round, it feels like such a really nice occasion to kind of socialise and to do something you love. So you could do that once a month, for example, or perhaps you could find a workshop in your local area and book that with a friend, and that can be a way to kind of make time to be creative. Or you could, invite your friends over in the evening for a glass of wine and get a card kit out that you can do together. So just kind of scheduling something into your diary that is a social event, but also a crafting or kind of painting or art type occasion can just help you to make that space in your life for creativity as well. And finally, my tip number 15 is to make it a habit. So, for example, is there a time that you could dedicate to it? So every Friday after work or every Saturday morning straight after breakfast, you can say, okay, this is my half an hour or an hour and I am doing crafting. I'm doing my card making, or I'm doing my painting, or whatever it is that you want to fit into your life. If you are able to make that a habit week after week, then eventually people will come to know that as your time for crafting or your half an hour of painting, and they can respect the time and the space that you need for that and that you spend on that. So these are all my tips, and I would love it if you could let me know in the comments if any of these worked for you and what you have done with your newfound time. Bye for now.